Okay, ladies and gentlemen, um, we're going to have a session about Israeli poetry that was written since October 7th. I want to, first of all, I want to also thank Barry Bergman for putting all this together. And I thank you for coming and for your interest in this topic. When October 7th happened, when October 7th happened, by the way, if you're watching this online and you don't have a copy of the text, hopefully the camera shows this. This is a web, you can just sign into this URL and see a copy of the text of the poems we're going to be studying. If you can't see it, it says tinyurl.com/24tikkun. So after October 7th, people were saying, "En milim," no words, what can you say? But eventually, people have to say things, and I think one of the first expressions of emotion and feelings about what happened can be expressed through poetry. So these are poems that were written in Hebrew by Israelis since October 7th, reflecting on what happened in a way that only poetry can do. And I'm in the process of putting together a book with Rachel Korazim and another woman, Heather Silverman from the West Coast, of these poems. And I don't know if you're familiar, most of us hopefully are familiar with Rachel Korazim. If you're not, you should be. She's an outstanding teacher of Israeli poetry, and she has courses online every week. So we're about to put together a book of these poems. Hopefully it'll be out by October 7th of this year. It'll have probably about 60 poems. I've chosen a few of those poems that actually draw on biblical and rabbinic sources, because this is Shavuot. And it'd be appropriate at any time. It's especially appropriate today. But there's something about Jewish poetry drawing on our sources that really adds a whole layer of depth and meaning to whatever the poet has to say. So hopefully you all have your handouts. I've asked for a Hebrew reader and an English reader to read the poem. So Varda, you can just take your where you are and just and read the first poem, Choshech al Pnei Tehom. Is the mic on?
Can you hear me?
יופי.
המורה מיכל שאלה אותנו, מי כאן יודע לומר לי מה פירוש הפסוק? והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו, והחושך על פני תהום. כל השנים האלה, מאז ועד היום, התהדה אותה שאלה בתוכי. התהדו בי עיני המורה המחפשות אצבע מונפת. התהדה בי אותה השתיקה והגורפת. ב7 באוקטובר הדהר צלצול הטלפון בביתה הדומם של המורה מיכל. זה אני, אמרתי. הנה התוהו ובוהו, הנה החושך, הנה התהום. Shalom.
Thank you. Wendy, will you read the English?
Read the English, right?
Right.
These are the names? Is that what we're doing?
No, we're doing Darkness Over the Surface of the Deep. You don't have it? Oh. First.
Darkness over the surface of the deep. My teacher Michal once asked us, who can tell me the meaning of the verse, "The earth was chaos and confusion, with darkness over the surface of the deep"? All these years, from then to this very day, the question has echoed within me. The teacher's eyes, as she was looking for a raised hand, resonated within me. That all-encompassing silence echoed in me. On October 7th, the ringing telephone echoed in the silent home of my teacher, Michal. "It's me," I said. Here's your chaos and confusion. Here's your darkness. Here's your deep. Goodbye.
Thank you. So, first of all, this is the holiday of Matan Torah, so we're starting Mibreshit. להתחיל Mibreshit, begin at the beginning. And I think this poem basically is saying that, when the world was created, everything was chaos, and the world came into being, and that was sort of the end of that chaos and confusion. And then here we have October 7th, and it seems all to be coming back. We finally, here it is, your chaos and confusion. And the story of a student trying to understand what this means and saying, I get it, I see it, now it's here. Calling up her teacher, and the phone rings and isn't answered. There's a lot of, the word echoed is used here 3 times. The word in Hebrew for echo, the verb is hidhed, which itself is an echo. It's an onomatopoeic word. And as is the word siltzul, which means to ring. Hebrew has some wonderful onomatopoeia in it. I find the last word just powerful. And it's funny, we've translated these poems, and it's always a challenge how you translate things. So the last word is shalom. And we chose to translate it goodbye. It's the end of a phone call. But it's, when you have the sort of meaning, it's goodbye. We're saying shalom in this context. It's certainly not a time of peace. And here it means goodbye. Right, exactly. So anyway, this is one example of this type of use of scriptural sources in this. Let's look at the second poem. The second poem is actually, it's written by Rachel Sharansky Danziger, who is the daughter of Natan Sharansky. Again, this is a poem going back to, well, we'll see. I'll tell you what's, okay, so, Bart, if you can read the Hebrew.
ביום. ביום אפשר להפות עוגיות לנשות המילואימניקים. ביום אפשר לשלוח הודעות מחזיקות לחברים. ביום אפשר לנחם אבלים. ביום אפשר להשקיע בחיים. אבל בשעות הלילה, איך להשתיק את המתים? אני שוכבת ולבי ער ודוהר. רודף אחריי שברי סיפורים שסופם כבר ידוע, והכל מרגיש פצוע, ואיך אפשר לישון, ואיך אפשר לשתוק, כשאיבדנו לנצח, יותר מ1,000 לבבות.
During the day, one can bake cookies for the wives of reservists. During the day, one can send strengthening messages to friends. During the day, one can comfort mourners. During the day, one can invest in life. But at night, there is no way to silence the dead. I lie down and my heart is awake and galloping, chasing fragments of stories whose endings are well known, and everything hurts and feels wounded, injured, damaged. And how can one sleep? And how can one be tranquil when we have lost for all eternity more than 1,000 hearts?
So this, another painful poem. Again, the Breshit thing of day and night. God created day and night, and here we have the difference between day and night. And there's a few things to point out here. Further down she says, how can one sleep? She can't sleep at night. And I bolded the lines that you should pay attention to here. So if you look at the footnote at the bottom, the line from the Song of Songs says, Ani yeshena v'li bi'er. I sleep, but my heart is awake. In her case, she can't sleep. She lies down and her heart is awake. So she's sort of playing off that verse. And Then there's another piece here which I first didn't get, and I actually, Rachel Porazim picked up on, and it really, it turns on that last word, livavot, and I'll tell you why. Livavot means hearts, but it's an unusual word. But it has to do with what is hakol, 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 margish batzua, everything, everything, everything. In my mind, the first thing that came to my mind is we have in the Birkat Hamazon, bakol, mikol, kol. And actually that is related to the fact that in the Torah, Abraham, the word bakol is used for Abraham, mikol with Isaac, and kol, mikol, kol, and kol with Yaakov, and they were each blessed in this way. So I was thinking, does it have something to do with that? But actually, it really has to do with this idea of how can one sleep. She's lying down at night, and she's saying the Kriyat Shema al Hamitah, the Shema you say, the bedtime Shema, which has the lines, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha b'chol modecha, kol, kol, kol. And I think that the final word there, livavot, livavecha, is what really is sort of the key that brings you back to that, to realize that she's saying, you can say that, but that doesn't really necessarily put you to sleep or put you at rest. Any questions on any of these first two poems? No, okay. Let's look at the third poem. Yes. Well, it means it's possible. It's possible to. Right. Right, right. And then she brings it back in the next to the last line, or third from last line, Eich efshar lishkot. How can one be tranquil? Tranquil. So you're right. I mean, it's really talking about potential. You have this potential, but then you lose that potential at night. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. So I don't know a lot about the authors. It's interesting. We're putting together this book, and so we've sent Rachel knows all the authors. I don't know them, but we actually asked each of them for a very short bio. Some of these authors I know are published poets that are well known as poets in Israel. Some of them are just folks that decided to begin writing poem, that were moved to write poetry. A lot of these poems appeared on websites, people's own, they would sort of, they haven't necessarily been printed anywhere. Some of them have appeared in a newspaper or something. But it's a sort of, and we've, I don't know, of the 60 poems, we probably have about 20 poets, or 20, 30 poets, and some have more than one poem in this book. Okay, Varda, b'dibur echad.
בדיבור אחד. שמרי את בנותייך קרוב אלייך. את האינטימיות של משפחה מתעוררת בשבת בבוקר. את הגעגוע לבית. את התמימות שבטוח לך בין ארבעה כתליו. את התקווה. וזכרי את השבת ההיא. את החרדה שסכסכה את שנתך. את כדורי ההרגעה שהכריחו אותך מעצמך. את כמיות היין. את הכאב על הילדה המשוטטת במי נהרות בעזה. את מי שישארו חבוקים לנצח. את האימה. התנערי מעפר רעים. צאי מתוך הפיכת בארי. לבשי בגדי היום יום. קומי מה-7 באוקטובר. אבל אני באה.
So there's a few things going on in this poem, but first let's hear the English.
In a single utterance. A, keep your daughters close to you. the intimacy of family waking up on Shabbat morning, the longing for home, the innocence of being safe among its walls, the hope. And remember that Shabbat, the anxiety that drove a wedge into your sleep, the tranquilizing pills that distanced you from yourself, the quantities of wine, the pain for the little girl wandering alone in Gaza tunnels, those who will remain hugging forever, the terror. B. Arise, shake off the dust, Re'im. Rise and go forth from the ruins, Be'eri. Clothe yourself in everyday clothing. Get up from the Shiva in October. C. But now where can I turn?
So this poem, which really deals with hostages, with people killed, with people displaced, and the fact that this took place on Shabbat. Took place on Shabbat, which opens up with the prayer of Lecha Dodi. And as the footnote points out, in the English words that are in italics, I just put them in italics so that we could focus on ones that actually come from the prayer Lecha Dodi, which we recite Friday nights. And the title in a single utterance, B'dibur Echad, is because, and that's a line from Lecha Dodi, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur Echad, which comes from a midrash. So we have two versions of the Ten Commandments, one in Exodus and one in Deuteronomy. And the commandment about keeping the Shabbat, in one case it says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat, keep the Sabbath day, and the other it says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, remember the Sabbath day. And the Midrash says, well, here you have these two versions of the Ten Commandments. Which one did God say? And the Midrash said, well, he said both of them in one utterance, B'dibur Echad. So that's the single utterance. But then the poem, the first stanza, focuses on the Shamor, which means to keep, to protect, to guard, and just talking about these people trying to protect their children in their homes when they're being attacked, waking up Shabbat morning, not feeling safe in your own home, and protect all of these things: intimacy, longing, innocence, and hatikva, the hope. And then it goes on to remember the second version of the commandment for the Sabbath. Remember that Shabbat. Remember that Shabbat. That was the Shabbat that this happened. And again, just talking about the impact of that. And this is afterwards, looking back and trying to remember all that pain that was experienced and the terror. So the first stanza ends with hope. The second stanza is terror. And then that next stanza really is, so in Lecha Dodi, there's a line, Hitna Ari me afar kumi, arise, shake off the dust and get up. So instead of that, that's arise, shake off the dust. Re'im, one of the kibbutzim that was attacked. The second one, Tze'i mitoch. So again, in Lecha Dodi, Tze'i mitoch ha'pecha, rise and go forth from the ruins. That's adapted here to refer to Be'eri, another community that was decimated. Livshi bigtei in Lecha Dodi, Livshi bigtei tefarte chami. Wear the clothing of your glory, my people. And here it is, clothe yourself in everyday clothing. It's the opposite of glorious clothing. It's everyday clothing. And then kumitzi mitocha hatecha, get up from the ruins. Here it is, get up from the. And here, this is also interesting how you translate it. Again, in Hebrew, you have this important play on words. Hashiva ba'October is the 7th of October, but also get up from the Shiva in October. In fact, I think I've suggested to my co-authors of this book, that are translators, that the title of the book be called Shiva, the 7th of October, really taking off from this. The last line here, now where can I turn? Ana aniba. So This is a line from the Tanakh when the brothers take Joseph out and take him into the pit, and you know, uh, and when the old Judah comes back and his brother's not there, and they're looking for his brother and he can't find him. He says, "Now, where can I turn?" And these are people who are really looking for people who are missing, not knowing what to do, where to go. Okay, let's read the next poem, Mishirei Hagolah Mimkoma. Just have to press that button in.
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Sorry. משירי הגולה ממקומה, גולה ממקומי, גלויה ונקלית, נודדת בין חרבות העיר שהייתה לי לבית. רגלי בוטשות עפר ואפר. פעם היה זה אשים רימונים, מפרדס הזיכרונות עלה ריח של חירות, או שמא היה זה ריחו של בית עשן. בסימפטותיה של עיר, אני נזקפת כגעגועים לבית אשר נחרב. גולה ממקומי, גלויה וניגלת, משוטטת בסמטאותיך של עיר פצועה. מחרבות הבתים אני נוטלת, כיור, ארון ופורחת, לוחות ושבריהם. בונה לך משכן אלוהי, ושכנתי בתוכו, ושכנת בתוכי.
Thank you.
From Songs of the Exiled from Her Dwelling Place. Exiled from my dwelling place, visible and exposed, wandering among the ruins of the city that was my home, my feet trample dust and ashes. Once it had been like the nectar of pomegranates, the fragrance of freedom wafted from the orchard of memories. Or was it perhaps the smell of a smoking house in a city's alleys? I am absorbed by longings for the house that was destroyed. Exiled from my dwelling place, visible and exposed, roaming the alleys of a wounded city. From the house's ruins I take a basin, an ark, and a curtain, tablets and their broken fragments. I am building you a sanctuary, my God, and I shall dwell in it, and you shall dwell within me.
Thank you. So this is really a poem about the people who've been displaced. Many of them are still displaced, living in hotels and other temporary locations far from home, and their home has been destroyed, burned down, too early to move back, don't know when they can move back. And so it's a song of exile, a poem of exile. By the way, this is the other, it says from the songs of the exile. The word shir in Hebrew means both song and poem. You always have to decide what are you going to say in English. I don't know why they don't have two different words in Hebrew, but so we've decided this is from the songs rather than from the poems, because sometimes you have these collections of songs, and you could have easily translated that from the poems of the exile from a dwelling place. So there's a lot going on here with language. Golam mimkomi, exiled from my dwelling place. So makom also is a term used for God. God is the omnipresent. And So that sort of resonates here. She's exiled not only from her home, but in a way, distanced from God. And then something you can't, we didn't even try to reflect in the translation is the Hebrew. If you look in those first two lines, this word golam, imkomi, gluya, niglate, it's all the same, the GL sounds there, gimelamed, so visible and exposed. You lose that in translation, but you can't do everything. And looking back at my home, dust and ashes, that's a biblical term. Both Abraham and Job kind of refer to themselves as dust and ashes. It's, it's this kind of, it's humility, but it's being humbled. And then the last phrase in the first stanza, the house that was destroyed, Labayit asher nechrav, also in Hebrew resonates with the temple. There was the Churban, the destruction of the Bayit. The Bayit is always a reference to the temple and Churban. So, and we'll see in the second stanza where this image of the home as a temple is also carried out with some specifics. So what does she take from the house's ruins? A basin, an ark, and a curtain. That's kior, aron, and parochet, which are all items that were found in the Mishkan and also in the temples. These were all ritual objects, and but I suppose you can have a kior, an aron, and a parochet in a home as well. Tablets and their broken fragments. We have this refers to the second set of tablets and the first set which have been shattered. There's a beautiful passage in the Talmud where they talk about having respect for a sage who is old and has forgotten a lot and sort of beyond his prime, can't remember much. And they say you still have to treat him with respect because both the original tablets and the fragments of the tablets were placed in the ark. But here, it's a reference to what was broken, the fragments of what was remaining in these towns. And she says, I'm building you a sanctuary, my God, and I shall dwell in it, and you shall dwell within me. So that's the line up at the top. This is a verse from Exodus. God says, "V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham," and you shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among you. It's an interesting thing. It also, God. You might expect us to say, "You will make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in it," but no, I'm going to dwell among you. But anyway, she's saying that I'm going to build a sanctuary for you, God, and I'm going to live there, and I hope that you are going to come back and join me. So we started out with her being exiled from her makom, and she's hoping that God will come back to her makom. The next poem, before we read the poem, I want to just turn to the next page, the one that starts with Jeremiah. Yes, yeah. Right, let's not. Louder? Yes, right. Thank you. Neck a lot. It's a big problem in translation. How do you convey things that are written in the feminine and make the reader know? And sometimes we try to put little things in there, flags to do that. In this case, you just know that this is a woman writing it, perhaps, and you have to sort of, when she says I, you do that. Yes. There's some funny words here. There's some strange words and some multisyllabic words and some words that you normally don't hear. Yeah. So thank you, Barta. I just gave Barta these poems a second ago, so she hasn't had a chance to look at them. Right. Yeah. So, Well, some of these people are and some aren't. But, so there was Gershom Scholem in the 1920s wrote this piece about the Hebrew language. And that was when there were people were trying to make the Hebrew language a normal language. And he sort of made the point that, every word there is so packed. Even if the Israelis want to run away from this tradition, they won't be able to help themselves. And so that's what happens here too. They can't avoid it. Yes. You're right. I was at one of the Saturday night protests and people holding signs. A lot of the signs really were because he reflected stuff from the Bible. They were a little weaker on the rabbinic texts, though. Yes. That's the beauty of it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And when you're in Israel, you do see these two levels. At one level, there's a certain normality and scratch the surface and you see what's next to it, below it. Let's look at the next poem. What do you see? So I said, oh, yeah, so take a look at these are some sources that I want you to just look at before we read the poem. So the first source is from Jeremiah. This is the beginning of Jeremiah. Jeremiah has this vision, and God says to Jeremiah, Jeremiah, what do you see? And Jeremiah says, I see a branch of an almond tree. And God says, yep, that's what it is. And this is a Hebrew pun. The Hebrew for almond is shaked, and the verse shoked means to be watchful. So he says that's a symbol that I'm going to be watching to make sure that my prophecy comes true. And then he says, what do you see? And he says, I see a steaming pot tipped away from the north. And then God says, yes, that means that from the north, evil will burst forth upon the inhabitants of the land. So this is this dire prophecy from Jeremiah about the enemies from the north and the bad things that are going to come. Then in the 1970s, someone named Avraham Zigman writes a song. It's both a shir and a shir. This is, he's writing the song for the Southern Command Chorus. It's an army chorus, and they're down in the south, and it's a counter-narrative. This is, the first thing was a negative, dire prophecy. He's got the positive thing, and good things are going to happen from the south. So it starts out with the same thing. Ma'ata roeh, what do you see? What do you see? I see an almond blossoming, and he sees, down in the second verse, I see a bird in the wind, within the walls of her nest is safe. And this is a sign of peace and quiet. So he's saying all these visions are visions of peace and quiet. Now let's look at this poem we're going to read, which is what I would call a counter narrative. So let's start with the Hebrew. Madra'ah. Yeah. Oh.
רואה, מה את רואה? בלונים פורחים אני רואה, עופות צווחים נוצות על הפרחים, אב מוליך עגלת תינוקת, גופה בעצמה התנועה. מה את רואה? אש בוערת בחנות פרחים אני רואה, בתוך הבית ילדים טובים, אישונים זורחים. קסטות אופניים לראשם, מפחד תותחים. אישה צועקת אל הטלפון, בלהט שמועה. מה את רואה? אני לא רואה. אני שומעת אלוהים בוכים, מאחורי אילן גבוה או מתוך שיחים. רק אם בשר ודם שוחחת על האפרוחים בכנפיה. רחמי כל העולם זורחים, איך היא נטרפת בשני חיה רעה. מה את רואה? אני רואה, היינו משונים. כוסתה השמש אפר מלאכים. תנאים חרשו שן בשדותינו. כל הילדים פוקחים. לא נישן יותר, אף פעם. העיר אותנו מחושך אלוהים.
Thank you.
What do you see? I see balloons flying in the air, shrieking birds, feathers in the doorways, a father pushing a baby stroller, frozen in mid-motion. What do you see? I see a fire burning in a flower shop. I see inside the house good children, their pupils glowing, bicycle helmets on their heads for fear of cannons, a woman yelling a dreadful rumor into the phone. What do you see? I do not see. I hear a divine being weeping behind a tall tree or inside the bushes. Only a flesh and blood mother hovering over her chicks, the whole world's compassion shining from her wings. How she is devoured by the teeth of a wild beast. What do you see? I see that we have become strange. The sun is covered by angels' dust. Jackals bare their teeth in our fields. All the children are wide-eyed. We will never sleep again. The darkness of God has woken us up.
Thank you. So, again, I think this is this counter narrative. Again, taking some of these images, what do you see? And where the song from the 70s talked about the birds flying and all that and how beautiful and sign of peace. Here we have this frightening image of the mother hovering over her chicks while she's devoured by a wild beast and the jackals, and just a horrific image. And the other things that I've just noted here, there's a couple of other just sort of references that come up with this thing about what do you see. So if you look back at the source sheet, there's this story of Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion. You might remember this from Yom Kippur. We have the martyrology. We read about the 10 martyrs who were killed for teaching Torah. And this rabbi was, his manner of death was he was wrapped in a Torah scroll and set on fire. And his students said to him, "Our teacher, Ma Torah, what do you see?" And he said to them, "I see the parchment burning, but its letters are flying to heaven. Ba'otiyot porchot." The letters are flying to heaven. And the first line here is the balloons flying in the air. I imagine those balloons being balloons that basically were detached from the baby stroller and flying off into the air. And then there's another one. Back in the poem, there's a line, I hear a divine being weeping. Ani shoma'at Elohim bochim. So Elohim in the Torah is almost always has a singular verb. But Elohim, the word itself, is kind of a plural type word because it ends in Yud Mem. So it normally takes a singular verb. There's one place I found where there's maybe more, but at least one of the few places is, I guess we don't have the source here. It's in the book of Samuel, where the, 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 this is about the story of the witch of Endor. And King Saul says, "What do you see?" to this woman, and she says, "I see Elohim ra'iti olim min haaretz." And again, that's an example where God is, where the word Elohim is used with a plural verb, and the JPS translation refers to that as divine being. So what, because this was actually like a image of a person. So it's just a question of how do you translate Elohim there? So I use that JPS translation for this poem. We just sent all of these translations to the poets to get their reaction. So we'll find out what they think and if we did anything. Robbie. I'm sure that's all resonant here. Yeah, absolutely. I tell you, we have to finish up. I want to stay on time. So we don't have time for the last two poems. So take these with you. I want to just give you something to look at. So in the poem To Run Away, and this, the poet actually kind of flagged this for us because we had him on the Zoom call because there's a key word here, two key words. In the third line, Zabcha, your rage, and the last line, the Vroach, it's really taken from an imagery from the book of Jonah. Jonah's on this boat, and the boat, we're there with the sailors, and there's this huge storm. And before they throw Jonah off the boat, they decide to they're throwing everything else off the boat. And this is saying, and that was to say, God, stop your anger, stop your anger with the seas. And here, these people are talking about throwing out all of these things, the Torah, the scrolls, the prayer books. So if only God's rage would come to rest. And then down at the bottom, that verb to run, that's also the verb that ties into Jonah. But you can read that on your own. And the last one, these are the names, is the beginning of the book of Exodus. These are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. And this is applying that to the people who have been abducted from the Gaza envelope, and you can see their words here that are, so there is no angel nor seraph to save them, not even a single expression of deliverance. So in the Haggadah, there's that God says, I will save you. The verse in the Haggadah from the Midrash is quoted, I will save you. Ani v'lo malach. I am not an angel. Ani v'lo saraf. Ani not a seraph. Ani v'lo shaliach. Thank you. And I am not a messenger. And here, so it's saying there is no angel, no seraph to save them. By implication, that means God didn't make it. God wasn't there. So forget the seraph, the angel. God was supposed to show up, and he didn't. And not an single expression of deliverance. Also, a Seder reference, because we drink 4 cups of wines because there are 4 words of deliverance used in the Torah: Hotzeiti, Shalati, Hitzalti, Lakachti, and they're saying we don't even have those words of redemption here for us. What are we going to do? So those are the remaining poems. I hope you can take it home and study them some more. And thank you very much.